I want to know if anyone else has hugged Cam the Ram.
Yes, if you have hugged Cam the Ram, please put that in the chat. We'd like to know. Our new emotional resilience tactic is hugging.
I know, it's going on my bucket list now. It never occurred to me that was a possibility, so.
Absolutely, Sue. We're going to have to make that happen for you.
I would love that.
Absolutely.
I'm not seeing anyone else say yes, they have hugged. We may have a line of people.
I think so. We may have to have an event fully on hugging Cam the Ram. I think that would be a well-received event at this point. Well, it is noon, so I'll go ahead and kick us off to get started. Welcome, everyone who's joined us. We're so glad you're here. We know these can be really challenging times, and I hope this webinar today brings you some joy and some helpful resources for emotional resilience. My name's Rachel. I work with the CSU Alumni Association, and I want to thank all of our CSU alumni and friends, and especially our Alumni Association members who are tuning in with us today. Thank you so much for your membership and helping support the Alumni Association. We are very glad that you decided to be here with us today. As you may already know, you're on a webinar, so you don't have your camera on and we can't hear you. So if you're eating lunch, you're not disturbing us at all. But we would love in the chat, if you'd like to put, if you haven't yet, you can include your name, grad year, where you're tuning in from, or just a simple hello. We always like to say hi back to you. And also throughout the presentation, Sue definitely wants us to be engaging. So if you have questions on any of her slides, please put those in the chat and she'd love to answer those right away for you. So no need to wait till the end to put any of your questions. Just pop them in as they come up and we'll address them. So a few other little housekeeping things. If you have any technology issues, I will put my contact information in the chat in case you need that. I'll also include the Alumni Association's calendar and the Larimer County Extension Office's website, which is where Sue works. So now it's my wonderful time to introduce Sue, our guest speaker today. Dr. Sue Schneider is a Health and Wellbeing Agent at the Larimer County office of CSU Extension. She provides leadership, programming, and education in the areas of community health, family well-being, and healthy aging. Sue is a medical anthropologist and a certified integrative health coach. So we are so thrilled to have her here with us. Sue, thank you. And I'll let you take it away.
Great. Well, I am thrilled to be here with you all. What a great group. And I'm seeing that many of you are from other parts of the state or living in other parts of the state right now and other parts of the country even. So it's exciting to have you, and thank you for taking your lunch break out and joining. I have been teaching mindfulness and stress reduction for many years, but I don't think there's ever been more of a pressing time to have these conversations and to really open ourselves up to some questions about where we are and what we can do to better support ourselves. I know in our culture, we don't make self-care a priority. We don't put that first, and then suddenly we are confronted with so many complicated situations in our lives. We're all facing similar things in the pandemic, but there's so many that face different things with the economy, with our kids being home and our families and aging parents, and it is such a complicated time. So I open this conversation up as a series of suggestions. I'm just gonna, put some information out there that I just offer as a way to think about where each and every one of you are. It should be deeply personal for you. And because I'm a mindfulness instructor, I don't teach without having experiential practices. So I have two planned. We'll see how much time we have, but I find it's really important. It's one thing to kind of gather information on this topic. It's another thing to settle in to our own bodies and take a look at our own minds and see where we really are. So that's kind of where we're going. We're really asking ourselves the question of how do we grow our inner resources and really acknowledge that we do have a steady core to ride the waves of all of this. We have human resilience in a way we may not understand. So those are some of the things I really want to emphasize. And as Rachel said, I absolutely encourage you to write questions in the chat. And if they're flowing pretty quickly, Rachel's going to help me sort through them. And if we don't get to them during the presentation, I'll try to end a few minutes early and we'll get to them afterwards. And as Rachel said, I am with the Larimer County Extension Office. We are the applied arm of CSU. So we get to take knowledge from the university and bring it into the community. And now in COVID times, we don't have any boundaries with our work. My classes are, national. So whoever wants to join can, because everything's on Zoom. So that's the way we're rolling right now. All right. So just to acknowledge where we are, we don't often just acknowledge this, but we are experiencing a massive emotional toll from this historical moment. We have multiple influences happening at once, and it's real. And we know from our data that's getting collected right now that we're facing a mental health crisis like never before. It's hard to define exactly what that looks like. We know depression and anxiety levels are on the rise, but everyone's experience is incredibly different. And so just to put a label of I'm feeling anxious doesn't really do it, because we have such a complex set of issues that we're all facing that are unprecedented for us. So I just want to name that before I even go into this topic. We do need to acknowledge that sometimes we just need to say, I'm feeling crummy right now, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I can't really define how I'm feeling because this is also different and new. But ultimately, we really do need to prioritize our care for ourselves. And there are different ways we can do that. We also really need to prioritize caring for others around us, extending our hearts. And we're going to do some practicing around that. See if I can get my slides to work here. All right. So you may not have taken a look at your habitual behaviors, but we tend, especially in times of stress and crisis, we tend to turn away. We tend to reject the difficulties coming at us, or the pain we're feeling, or the overwhelm. And we might turn away from others. That might mean we isolate. A lot of us tend to kick in our controlling instincts. I watched myself go pretty crazy in the beginning of this pandemic. There was so little I could control. Everything was changing. And so it's like, how clean can I keep my house? Or how organized can I keep some of my relationships right now? And I turned to that control because it was the only way I could feel like there's anything I could do. And then I recognized what was going on. That was adding my stress. Some of us numb out. We know that the numbers of people who have been reaching for alcohol and substances has really grown over this crisis. There are many ways that we numb. We turn to our distractions, our devices, our phones, or whatever it is. And we don't even notice we're doing that, but that's a very, very protective mechanism. We also distract ourselves, and there are so many different ways we can distract ourselves. And all of these habitual reactions are really to keep from feeling what we're feeling, which can be very challenging and very difficult. And it's really important just to become aware of that. And that's what mindfulness is, and that's kind of where I'm going with this. How can we do this differently? This is not in our natural instincts, but turning towards, leaning into, acknowledging what's going on, working around the edges, allows us to begin. It's really viewed as the seeds of healing. When we avoid all of what is painful to us, we can't begin a healing process. So turning towards, staying present, and we'll be practicing with that. Practicing kindness, that connection is so critically important when we're stressed out and overwhelmed. What we give, actually we get, and we may not recognize that. And then a lot of what this talk is going to be about is really developing our inner resources. There are inner resources we don't even realize we have. And we can tap into those really it works to decrease our stress levels, our nervous systems can be put in balance. We can become more aware of our habitual reactions and be able to alter some of those things that we're doing that may not serve ourselves in the best way or serve others. So what is resilience? It's defined as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. And boy, oh boy, are we facing some of those, lots of those, multiple of those right now. So the question is, how do we adapt? And the biological definition of adaptation is a change or the process of change by which an organism or species becomes better suited to their environment, which is really interesting because as human species, we don't have a choice but to do that right now. We are naturally doing it. We are naturally calling our inner resources to do it. We just may not be recognizing how we are adapting. And really what positive resilience is adapting in a way that supports ourselves and supports those around us, really, how we care for others. So this is research on children, but I feel like it's very applicable, this continuum of stress. You know, just to say that, you know, whoa, backspace, sorry about that. You know, even different days, you might see yourself on this continuum in a different way. There is such thing as positive stress. It's called eustress. It does still increase the heart rate briefly and elevate the stress hormone levels. Sometimes it can really push us in the right direction. Like me doing a presentation, for example. This is a little bit stressful, but it's positive because it's helping me develop, right? But not all things are positive stress. There's tolerable stress, which perhaps a lot of us are living kind of in that mid zone right now. We've kind of gotten used to the crisis situation. Some of us may be in crisis, but the stress may be tolerable. We have to acknowledge though, that it's ongoing and it could be chronic. And then there's the toxic stress, which is really the prolonged activation of stress. And in this research, you know, the argument is that supportive and protective relationships are really important in the stress continuum. But I just want to emphasize that it changes all the time. One of the challenges now, though, is that we are in a situation with fairly chronic stress where it's just ongoing and it's a long-term thing and we don't really know when the end of this is in sight or how we can kind of feel a little bit normal again. That chronic stress, our bodies are not used to that kind of stress. That's not the kind of stress we used to have back when we lived in the savannah and we need to get in fight or flight reaction really quickly and our bodies knew what to do to get out of harm's way, but we also knew how to settle back down. Some of us have elevated fight or flight reactions all day long. And so that's really, I think, a lot of what I'm kind of talking about in this talk, ways that we can work with that more chronic level of stress. And we respond differently to stress. I'm sorry, I keep looking for my mouse. There it is. We respond differently to stress. So it depends on the intensity and duration of our stressful experience. And different levels of stress have different effects on our bodies and our brains. Different bodies respond differently to stress. And we all just act different when we're under stress. Some could be energized in this moment. And I've heard a lot of stories about really creative, innovative things that are happening in this moment of stress. Others are just burnt out and exhausted, overwhelmed. And so just acknowledging we all, you know, do react differently. There's no right and wrong. It's just kind of, you know, mindfulness brings this awareness of where am I and how can I be with this? How can I work with this? The other part of the complexity of what we're dealing with is there's just a lot of ambiguity right now. And there's a lot of change. And that uncertainty can be really triggering for a lot of us. We tend to, as I mentioned, my control strategies, we tend to like to really, you know, manage our environment so we know what to expect. And to some extent, we kind of can't do that. We do receive change as external. They're triggers to us, but we respond internally. And it's really what we're doing is kind of coming to terms. We're adapting with this new normal. But our internal responses often are off of our radar. We're not noticing what is happening in that internal response. And I bring this quote from Jack Kornfield, he's one of my meditation teachers. He writes, one of the problems in our society is we have not learned to distinguish uncertainty from anxiety. And I think what's happening right now is we're pretty triggered by our anxiety. It's kind of scary to us. And we can recognize that this is just a natural and normal response to uncertainty, of which we are all living through. So I want to talk a little bit for a minute about how we tend to fuel the fire through our own reactivity. We fuel the fires of our stress. On the upper smaller arrow, you'll see 3 points. I mean, we have our everyday life circumstances that can be very stressful on an average day. We have our life demands and the responsibilities that we carry. And then we have like typical normal stressful events, illnesses, job loss, changes like that. All of that is really, we have to learn to adapt and manage all of those things. But what happens is we tend to layer on a lot of reactivity. We add some extra anxious thoughts. We start catastrophizing what's going to happen, fearful thoughts about what's happening. We start turning against ourselves, like, how could I be in this position? Why can't I make this work? Why can't I figure this out? So you can see that this bottom arrow is bigger. And you can see that there are inputs that we add to our existing stress. That bottom arrow, I suggest, is what we actually have control over, if we can become aware of what's going on in our minds. We can see we're adding fuels to the fire. And I'm not suggesting in any way that decreasing our anxious thoughts or stopping the catastrophizing is an easy thing to do or a natural thing to do. But I am suggesting with mindful awareness, we can begin to recognize, maybe it doesn't need to be this overwhelming right now. Maybe I've just got the problem I'm dealing with, and maybe I don't need to add all of these layers. So there's a formula I like to share. It's down below. It's suffering equals pain or difficulty multiplied by the reaction or the resistance we have to it. So the pain or the difficulty is, okay, right now, I'm working from home. I'm kind of trapped in my house, supporting my 10-year-old with his virtual learning all day now. And it's difficult, right? That's the pain right now. There are certainly good opportunities and aspects of that, but the reality is it's not what I want necessarily. But I can start throwing, they call it darts. I can start throwing darts at it. I can get really angry about it. I can blame my family for it. I can blame my boss. I can blame the county health director for it. Or I can resist what's happening and deny it. I'm going to do things differently. I'm not going to be responsible in this moment, or whatever it is. That reaction or resistance is expanding my suffering, because the thing is, I just have these issues to deal with. They are what they are. How much more do I want to suffer, to amplify my suffering? So it's a question we can ask ourselves, and we can stop throwing darts, the anger, the catastrophizing, the anxiety, if we recognize that we have control over some of that. So our perception of stress is also really important when we talk about resilience. And this is some great research that Kelly McGonigal has done. And she makes the argument the way we perceive our stress impacts our experience of it. So some of us really view our stress as debilitating and a huge problem, right? And our bodies and minds react together. So we do go into this fight, flight reaction. And, there's truth. We're all dealing with chronic stress and anxiety, and many of us are dealing with burnout. To some extent, we can reframe some of this, and we can look at an adverse event as a challenge, and maybe not an opportunity, but if we can shift the thinking a little bit, we might see what kind of motivation comes out of it. And this is called a challenge response, which, as I was kind of describing about eustress, can release adrenaline and kind of get you motivated to move some things forward. So how can this crisis shine the light on some things that you felt maybe you've wanted to change anyways, you want to see happen? These are all questions we can ask ourselves. I don't want to be Pollyannish about it and suggest just shift our minds and all of a sudden we're positive and stress is an opportunity. Not at all. I want to just offer some possibilities, some ways to reframe a little bit and help ourselves kind of move into a place where we can view, you know, what we want to move forward with in the future, especially if this is going on for a long time. So to summarize some of this, truth number one is our perception of stress directly influences how we experience it. So there's an opportunity there to maybe shift our view a little bit. Truth number two, our reaction to stress can amplify our suffering. So it's the formula, stress or suffering equals pain times resistance, right? And being able to take a look at how our reaction, are we reacting or are we responding? Response means we put a pause in between whatever's triggering us and we make a choice of how we want to be after that point. Truth number three is that we may not have much control over our circumstances, but we do have control over how we respond to them. So this is some interesting research, and this is in the field of positive psychology, that talks about what determines happiness. And this really kind of helped me put things in perspective. So the research suggests that about half of what determines happiness for us is actually based upon genetics. So we inherit a depressive state or a heavy state or, you know, the potential to see joy and optimism to some extent. Only 10% of what determines happiness has to do with our external circumstances. This is fascinating to me because it's not a whole lot. But the other 40% has to do with our actions and our thoughts within the domain of our choices. And there's so much cool research coming out of positive psychology. I mean, we know that like there's this set point for happiness. So they found with lottery winners, their happiness might get a really big bump for a little while, but ultimately, regardless of how much money they have, they're going to come right back to that set point. And that has a lot to do with what we're talking about here, their genetics. And then the choice there is, how do I want to live my life? But that's not related to the money, even though we make this assumption, the more money you have, the happier you are. So 40%, right? Actions and thoughts. This is a big deal. We have more control than we think in how we react and respond. And then the next truth is that we have the capacity to build stress resilience and healthy coping strategies. We are much more resilient than we think. And that resilience is a positive adapted trait that can be learned. We can all learn this, but just like anything else, we have to practice changing our brain, rewiring our brain, practicing mindfulness, bringing awareness to the moment, all of those things, but we can learn them. So if you think that resilience or not, and there's some truths embedded in this, resilience is not the ability to avoid difficulty or distress. And this comes back to an earlier point I was making, is that our habitual response tends to be to turn away, avoid it, get rid of it. But that's not helpful and it's not resilience. We're not going to grow if we're constantly pushing things away. And the truth is that the road to resilience is likely to involve considerable emotional distress. We have to go through it to get somewhere. We can't go around it. And so that's kind of something we have to acknowledge. And then resilience is not a personality trait that only some people possess. So as I was saying, anyone can learn resilience behaviors, thoughts, and actions. So how do we cultivate resilience? And I keep coming back to this. There's no way around this either. We have to develop our inner resources. No one around us, the circumstances around us are not going to help us in this regard. And Rick Hansen, who's a wonderful neuropsychologist, he writes that we need to experience what we want to grow so we can help that become a mental habit. So I talk about the habits of mind that we tend to rely on that are not so adaptive or helpful for us. In the case of developing our inner resources, we need to be able to practice things that will help us feel grounded, be stronger, bring more awareness, be more compassionate, more gratitude. And over time, these practices can become mental habits. And in a way, they'll replace our previous habits of the turning away and avoiding and numbing and distracting and all of that. So I want to start here with mindfulness. And this is where we get to do a little bit of practice. This is my favorite definition of mindfulness from Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese monk. He writes that mindfulness is a bell that reminds us to stop and silently listen. The important signifier of this is that we can't make a change in our reactions or our behaviors or, adaptation to stress unless we learn to pause. That pause is not something that we learn in our culture. We don't learn how to pause or stop or pay attention to what's happening. And mindfulness is this 3,000-year-old art/science that really is a systematic process to helping us learn how to stop and listen. Because if we can bring that pause after a trigger comes, only then can we make a wise choice of how to proceed forward. So mindfulness, in other words, is our awareness. It's the capacity to bring awareness to our inner landscape, whatever's happening in the moment. And Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's a wonderful, he really brought mindfulness to the West at the University of Massachusetts. He coined this definition about mindfulness, that it is paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And we may not recognize how much we layer onto our present moments, how much judgment, how much labeling, good, bad, I want this, I don't want this. And so paying attention on purpose in the present moment non-judgmentally is really a way to be able to drop some of those labels and just open up to whatever's happening. So we can learn to stay present and we can learn to turn towards slowly. And I'm not saying we jump into facing the demons in our lives, but very slowly we can work around the edges. So instead of talking about mindfulness more, I am going to lead you in just a few minute practice that can help us come into presence. Maybe it's been a long time since you really came into presence, and maybe some of you are long-term practitioners of this. But I just encourage you to give yourself permission to just be with this for a moment. And just, if you're comfortable, close your eyes. Just feel the support of your chair. Feel the connection of your feet on the ground, even like roots of a tree, just digging down into the earth. And just noticing what it feels like to be supported in this position with nothing to do, nowhere to go. In this little practice, I'm gonna invite you to sense what it means to arrive into presence. So you may just start by taking a few long, deep breaths. Feeling the breath deep in the belly, rising up. You might even breathe out through your mouth. Just exploring what it's like to notice your breath and let the movement of your breath just collect your attention. So you're just paying attention to the in and the out breath. Deep, long in breath and releasing, just letting go. And just letting the breath resume in a natural rhythm. And then letting your senses be awake. So you're listening to the sounds around you. Noticing what's in your room, in your space. And then listening inward so that you're listening to and you're feeling your body. You might notice the places that are tense or tight that might want to let go. Maybe there can be some loosening or softening in the shoulders. Maybe you can soften your hands. Relax down through your belly. Just becoming aware of the sensations throughout your body. Listening to and just feeling this whole moment. You might want to gently bring your attention to the area around the heart. So you can feel the heart. Whatever mood is there, without feeling like you have to push anything away. Just noticing, paying attention to the sounds around you, the feelings in your body, the mood that's in your heart. And sensing now the quality of presence that's right here in this moment. Maybe noticing the difference between right now and perhaps when you first arrived. And just know that you can come back to this place of relaxed softness at any time. So it's hard not to see your faces, but feel free to write in the chat if anything came up for you, if you had any experiences, or what that was like for you. It's simple, but it's not easy sometimes. And I can guarantee that there were a lot of monkey minds running around, that your mind, as soon as you got quiet, got super busy. And that maybe even those habits that we talked about earlier kind of already came up. You wanted to distract yourself, or you wanted to reject what was happening. But this practice is really, really powerful if we can learn to just get silent and bring some loving, kind attention to whatever is happening. Because the next step that we can do is bring acceptance to whatever we're finding. So it's mindful awareness is one thing, but acceptance is another. And the acceptance part is so critical. So I'm seeing some chats. My body felt so relaxed. Shoulders actually dropped. Absolutely. Very relaxing. Once my quiet mind became distracting, that's okay, because it was a reminder to become silent again. And that's what we do, even if it's a million times, is noticing when our mind gets busy and wanders. We can come right back to our breath or our body. Rachel felt calm and peaceful. Stephen got to practice just letting the thoughts go as they came along. Didn't have to do anything with them. I mean, imagine moments where we have nothing we have to do. And we watch our thoughts. They're like clouds in the sky. We think, oh, these thoughts are so intense and they're going to stay forever, but they don't. When we're not attached to them, we can watch them just move on. Yeah, Amanda felt a sense of control that I haven't felt in a long time. And it's a funny version of control, isn't it? Right? Control meaning I can just be here in this moment and let whatever's happening happen. Emily said that was helpful to slow down and listen and relax. However, when we got to the heart section, yeah, we got sad and discouraged and went to the beginning and let go of the thoughts. And I hate to tell you this, the truth is we have to go there. We have to feel what's in our hearts. If we're not ready to really feel it, it's okay. You're right. We go back to the beginning and work with, sit in our bodies, feel our hands, watch our thoughts. But these feelings of sadness will arise, and it's really important. Yeah, and Tammy experienced a moment of peace. Yeah, and for some of us, we were probably highly agitated and it wasn't a comfortable thing, and all of it is fine and good. Yeah, besides mindfulness, is it healthy to focus on the things we can control now and then, like cleaning my house when other things are beyond our control? There is certainly an argument to be made for that. I would never judge, our efforts to try to control what we can. I'm just arguing that we just notice it. Like, wow, my control mechanism is really working hard here because I feel so out of control. And it's just that awareness. I mean, I make jokes about that all of the time, how I really, I fight hard to make sure I feel like I have control. But mindfulness, just stopping and taking a breath and noticing, here she goes, that controlling part of her, that's what it's all about. And then you can choose, like, oh, you know what? I think I can rest. I don't need to try so hard to clean my house right now. I might be able to rest, or this feels really good because it makes me feel like I'm in control. But the point is, you have a choice. You have a choice. You're not reacting, you're responding because you have that awareness. Really great question. So to move on, and not to move on, because we don't let go of the mindfulness, hopefully, but we can add the other side. There are really two sides of the coin with mindfulness. It's the awareness piece that we just noticed and paid attention to. But there's also what I mentioned, the acceptance piece, which comes out of a place of compassion. And right now, it's a really hard time to feel compassionate towards ourselves because we've got so much going on and we are watching so much suffering around us. But I argue that really the first step towards being able to be compassionate with the world in this moment of crisis has to be starting with self-compassion. So really the question is, can I be there for myself? When that control mechanism kicks into high, I'm kind of harsh on myself, right? I'm pretty activated. Can I notice that and say, it's okay. I acknowledge right now in this moment, I am totally overwhelmed, right? And we don't offer ourselves this kind of caring and compassion. For those of us with kids or aging parents right now, we're doing a lot of that for others, but it's kind of like, can you imagine, holding a child with so much care, the way you would hold an infant, but holding yourself in that way, and we just don't do that. And even a wonderful practice for that is, before I go to bed, or while I'm lying in bed, before I go to sleep, I just put my hand on my heart and I just notice. And I say to myself something like, may I be well, may I sleep in peace, may tomorrow be a better day, or whatever it is. But again, it's like holding myself with a little bit of compassion. Do you feel like you're on your own side? And Kristen Neff and Chris Germer have created this practice called the self-compassion break. I'm not going to really walk through it with you, but I want to point it out because what it does is recognize 3 elements that we sometimes just take for granted when emotional distress arises. We don't often name when something's happening. So if we are feeling particularly overwhelmed, just to acknowledge, gosh, this is a moment of stress right now. And just that alone is very compassionate. The second step of that, though, is you can acknowledge it's not just me, but stress is a part of life right now, or we're all in this together. We're all feeling a lot of challenges. And there's this concept that it's common humanity. If we open up our lens and recognize, I am not the only one in pain, it really soothes some of that pain. And it's true, we're never the only one suffering, but we always feel so alone, and we get all constricted and narrow with our feelings of our own suffering. So the second part of it might be to say, everyone's suffering, or stress is a part of life. And then the third part of it is bringing that self-compassion. May I be kind to myself in this very moment? May I be well? And that self-compassion break might do a lot, especially if you find yourself going. It's that kind of pause. It may be bringing some awareness, but it also may be walking through these steps of naming, recognizing how big this is, and just having a moment of self-compassion. Compassion is a topic I teach entire classes on, but this is just a little snippet. I hope it resonates with you. I think for many of us who we're not given permission to care for ourselves or take time out for these kinds of breaks. I'm giving you permission. Give yourselves permission. This is really important. Seeding positivity. There is so much we can do, and it requires intention. It really does. Finding refuge in pleasant memories and things that we love, and music and art and affirmations and books, whatever it is. But it's taking that refuge and it's taking a step further. It's internalizing those experiences. It's having the experiences and following through with them, but it's really internalizing it, which means at the end of the day, when I kind of sort through what my day was, I actually hold those experiences in my heart, in my body. That felt good. What I read resonated with me, that music, the memory. And it may sound silly, but there's so much research that suggests we can turn states, experiences of joy or happiness or contentment into traits. We can actually have our bodies physiologically respond to positive experiences. And this has nothing to do with positive thinking. I would never suggest that we could think ourselves happy. It doesn't work. It means having the experiences and holding them and practicing them and making a commitment to seeding this in our lives. And what happens is we rewire our brain, because neurons that fire together wire together. If we spend more time seeding the positivity, and we'll talk about gratitude in a minute, rather than relying on the negativity bias or the anxiety part of the brain, then we actually rewire our brain in a very different direction. This can be really powerful. And then gratitude really is a magnifying glass for all of this. There's tons of research as well on gratitude. And it could be just taking pleasure in the simple things, like recognizing, God, I'm so appreciative that I can take a walk today. And as someone living in Fort Collins, who's close by to a massive fire, the snows came, crazy enough, and now today, it's probably like 50 degrees, we have this fresh air. and I haven't breathed fresh air in like a week or so. The smoke just got so bad. And so I just recognize how helpful it is to have a moment to breathe fresh air. It can be simple things, being happy for others, doing good deeds. We get so much more from giving than we actually think we are. Just recognizing and appreciating our own successes or just the moments that we have. And again, tons of research about gratitude strengthening the immune system and helping us in so many ways. These are very much our inner resources that we can call upon. So our second and final little practice here is actually going to be a gratitude practice. I find this to be really powerful. Just a few minutes. So again, settle back into that comfortable, rested, supported position. Just adjust how you're sitting, again, feeling held by the chair. And again, noticing that connection of your feet to the floor. If you're comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes. And just take a few moments to bring your attention back fully into your body. And again, it might help to relax your shoulders, just feeling some softening, letting your hands be soft, loosening the belly, and letting this next breath be received in a softening belly. This breath. Now this one. And again. Just feeling the aliveness in your body. Maybe softening the face. Letting the eyes smile a little. Letting the brow be smooth. And a slight smile at your mouth. And just feeling the movement of the breath at the heart. Just aware of the state of your heart right now. And I'd like to invite you to begin to scan your life and become aware of what you are grateful for. You can do this in a simple way. Just fill in the blank. I am grateful for. And then just let whatever arises come. And when you have something, you can pause with it. And then the next, I am grateful for. You might find it interesting to do this practice whispering if you're alone. If it's comfortable for you. Just sensing what you're grateful for and whispering it out loud. So feel free to begin. The people, the experiences, the goodness in your life. I'm grateful for. Just feeling the sincerity and the tenderness in your heart. I am grateful for. And now just bringing to mind one thing you've touched on that has a lot of light to it, a lot of aliveness, something you're grateful for. And sense what about it makes you so grateful. What is it that really brings alive the gratitude? And just feeling the warmth and the brightness of it. Bringing your attention to it. Letting it fill your body. You may invite it to be as big as it wants to be. And include it in all of your senses. Just letting your body experience a feeling of love or appreciation or gratitude. Just letting the experience sink into your cells the way light fills the room or water soaks into a sponge. Just surrendering to it. Grateful, grateful, grateful. So coming back into the room, the invitation now is maybe just to hear from those of you who want to write in the chat box, just naming or writing what you're grateful for. I can continue on and we can hear from you. What did you notice in those moments? Are there things that you hadn't paid attention to in a long time? And how did that make your body feel? Yeah, so it brought Kelly some physical comfort. And from Rachel, there was gratitude for my partner and for our home. And Amanda was grateful for her health and her family. Yeah, there's always so much gratitude right now for where we live and the people around us. And Natalie said she's grateful for technology, which allows her to stay connected with her daughter who's working and living abroad. That's so hard, and you're not going to be able to see her for quite a while due to the pandemic. Thank goodness for technology. Yeah. Yes, and gratitude for your faith. Gratitude for small things I don't necessarily think about, shelter, enough of what I need, the basics of life. Right, this definitely takes us down to the basics. They're not small things. Yeah. So feel free to keep going with that. I'm going to keep moving on. And I just want to kind of make a point that I hope I've been making throughout, is that this whole process of cultivating our inner resources, it's not an intellectual process. It is a practice, and we need to have the process of installation. So it sounds so technical, but it's one thing to activate the good memories or the good things in our lives or the awareness or the compassion or the self-love. But hopefully what I've been offering you is that to really have it help you navigate the challenges of life right now, we need to install it in our body. So experiencing doesn't equal learning. Activation without installation may be pleasant, but no trait resources are acquired. Turning it from a state of gratitude to a trait is what installation's about. So we can become more compassionate, grateful, mindful by repeatedly installing experiences of compassion, gratitude, and mindfulness, which is what we've been practicing today. And I just really want to argue here that we have so much more control than we think we do. I call this agency, and that even in dire circumstances, we have a choice of how to respond, right? We can react or we can respond, and the difference is that pause. We can shift our attention to things that will support us rather than focusing on the negative, and we can take actions that help us maintain balance and equanimity. And there are lots of them. What I've offered are just a teeny example, but there are so many ways to balance our nervous systems, rewire our brains, and really help install those traits. As Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor, wrote, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves, and it is all very possible. And my last slide, just to share and come back to this point of how resilient we are, just to, well, actually, just to point out, Elizabeth Gilbert has this wonderful TED Talk. It's called It's Okay to Feel Overwhelmed. Here's what to do next. So I pulled this few bullet points from that talk, but it's a wonderful talk if you're interested in that. But she argues there's no species on Earth more capable, resourceful, or resilient. She reminds us that we're each genetic survivors of hundreds of thousands of years of tumult and struggle, that this kind of stuff actually is nothing new, but it's ancient history, and we all have the genetic capability to manage it because we draw from a deep reservoir of shared human consciousness that knows what to do in moments of difficulty. We absolutely do. So that brings us to the end of my presentation. And I am happy, I think we have just a few minutes. I'm happy to take questions that you have. And I also, and I'm going to send the slide set to Rachel, right? And make that available to you all. So you can use these tools or look up the resources. There's a video series. They're actually mini classes that I've developed for these difficult times. They're on our website, larimerextension.org. Just click on the Health and Wellness link, or I think it's Health and Wellbeing, and my resources are there. I've developed an online program through CSU Online called Living Mindfully. You can Google that, and there's just a ton of wealth of resources and practices in that online program. And I have online mindfulness classes every Thursday morning from 9 to 10. Anyone, anywhere can join. It's been so much fun. And we practice together, different practices every week, and we share some insights. So lots of resources there, and I'm happy to offer any of those to you if you're interested. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Sue. I saw someone in the chat said, wow, and that's definitely how I feel too. Just a nice sense of calm and such a great reminder for this lunch hour. So thank you so much for leading us through so many helpful practices today. And thank you everyone so much for joining in, and for hopefully you enjoy the calm that you're now feeling. And Sue is such an incredible resource. I will definitely be joining in some of those Thursday mornings myself. So hope to see some of you there and engaging more with Sue and CSU Extension going forward. And of course, with the Alumni Association, please feel free to check out our virtual events as well. Thank you all so much for being here and for your wonderful feedback in the chat. And Sue, again, my deepest thanks for being here with us today. I think that was very needed for myself even today. So thank you for your time and expertise.
Good. Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful. Take good care.
Yeah, everyone, be well and go Rams. All righty. Take care, everybody. Thanks again, Sue.
All right. Thank you.